In terms of this morning's agenda, obviously we've got a little welcome in the house rules from myself, which we're doing now. We'll then move on to an overview of the fund and some of the learnings from round one. We'll then have one of our successful round one projects coming to speak to us. That's Andy Dean. His project is a type A project, and it's quite large scale, so several community buildings, so it's a really interesting project. We then have our new Hub Community Energy Development Officer, Sue, who's going to give a short introduction to her role and a little bit more about support that the Hub can offer. Another successful stage one case study coming from Helen Todd from South Yorkshire EcoFit. This is a type B project, which I'll talk a little bit more about later on in the presentation, and then some time for questions and answers at the end. So we will move straight in. A little bit of background just about what the hub is for anybody who's not aware. We are one of the 5 hubs across England. So there's ourselves in the North East and Yorkshire. There's the North West, the Midlands, the Greater South East and the South West. The Community Energy Fund is a programme that's been run across all 5 hub regions. We just obviously have our own separate pots of funding to make sure we can distribute that funding locally. And we're all funded by the Department for Energy Security and Net Zero, which was formerly the Department for Business and Industrial Strategy. So it's still sometimes referred to as BASE, just in case there's any confusion there. I've listed the aims of the hubs on there. In short, we're here to attract commercial investment, increase the number, quality and scale of local net zero projects, support net zero across the nation, make sure that we're doing a knowledge sharing programme to make sure that all the hubs are sharing as much knowledge as possible with each other and with our regions, and to raise local awareness of the opportunities and the benefits of net zero investment. So what is the Community Energy Fund? It's a £10 million grant scheme that's for both urban and rural communities to develop community energy projects. It does run quite closely to the previous Rural Community Energy Fund. A lot of the eligibility and the criteria are the same. The main change is that urban communities can be involved, so it's open to all community groups as opposed to just those in rural areas. It's for community-based organisations which are looking to develop projects for the local community. So this means that funding is available only for development stages. This could be stage 1 feasibility or stage 2 further development, but it does mean that there's no capital funding available for actual asset installation or capital delivery. It's really important to note that all projects proposals should ensure that they're at least 50% community owned. This could be either the project's community owned or the final asset must be 50% community owned. So it's worth bearing in mind to make sure you're eligible there. And the funding is being released to try and remove some barriers to investment that we've had reported that community energy groups are facing. In terms of eligible organisations, as I've mentioned, it is primarily available to community-based organisations and voluntary organisations. There is a little list there of a bit more specific groups that would be eligible. I won't read them all out, and obviously you'll get a copy of these slides, but just so you're aware, if you think, do we sort of fall into that category, have a read of this list. And if you're not 100% sure if you would be eligible, please just contact us and ask. We'd rather we could confirm for you as opposed to you spending time filling an application and not being eligible. A little bit of information about some specific sort of groups that may want to apply. So schools, they cannot apply directly. However, if a community group was to work with a school and to look at assets potentially on a school site, then this would be eligible. But we would have to ask that the project itself would have benefits to the community around the school, as opposed to just, for example, lowering the school's energy bills. Local authorities can apply, they can lead a bid, but they can only claim back sort of formally requested fees, so they cannot claim back staff time. So this could be planning applications, grid connections, feasibility studies, which they would be able to claim back for. We do encourage local authorities to be involved with projects because obviously they have a lot of insight and they can offer a lot of support, but just so they're aware that they cannot claim back for their own costs. And in terms of nationwide organisations, we do welcome applicants from nationwide organisations, or if you do sort of span more than one hub region. However, we would recommend that you reach out to whichever hub you want, depending on which one you spans, just to have a conversation to understand the grant value and the expenditure you'd be eligible for, just to make sure that there'd be no sort of risk of double funding, or to make sure that you'd be aware if your project, the cap that you could apply for your specific project. So type A projects, which are asset-based projects, these include all of your sort of retrofit measures that really a list as long as you could think of. Obviously, the list on the screen is not exhaustive. Please take some time afterwards to have a read through. If you are interested in a technology, that is not on this list, please do reach out to us, because we are keen to hear about new technologies and new innovation. Obviously, there's just only so many technologies we can fit on a slide. So don't be put off if you don't see it immediately on this list. Just have a chat to us. And please make sure that you are investigating grid connection capacities and wait times if this would be relevant to your project, just to sort of manage your own expectations after the Community Energy Fund work has been done, to make sure you're not sort of stopped dead by a grid wait time that's far too long. Type B projects are new to the Community Energy Fund, so they weren't part of the Rural Community Energy Fund, but they are a welcomed addition because it means we can obviously fund further sort of community works. Type B projects are only available for stage 1 funding, which I'll come to the differences in the stages in a moment, but just to be aware that you can only apply for stage 1 feasibility for a Type B project. But these do cover energy advice sort of services. These can be to either fuel poor households or any households, as long as it's giving energy advice to those that need it. These can be bulk buy schemes for either energy efficiency measures or low carbon technologies. And they can also be retrofit programs over multiple households. So the differences between stage 1 feasibility and stage 2 project development, we've put a little table on just to try and make it a little bit easier. So stage 1, you can apply for up to £40,000, and stage 2, you could apply for up to £100,000. It's worth noting that to be eligible for stage 2 funding, you must have completed stage 1 activity. It doesn't need to have been through the RCEF fund or the CEF fund or any hub funding at all. You would just need to have done full technical feasibility on your project before you would be eligible to apply for that further detailed project development money. So stage 1 covers the professional support that's needed to scope project feasibility, whereas stage 2 is the professional support that actually makes a project investment or construction ready. So this could be your planning applications, your grid applications, the building of your business case, structural surveys, ecological surveys, excuse me, and things like that. So in order to have completed your outcomes for stage 1, you must have a full feasibility study to be completed. And for stage 2, you should have obtained planning permission or have the planning permission ongoing. We do know some of these things can take a long time. So we'd be willing to see that an application had gone in as opposed to being fully signed off. Just obviously we wouldn't want to put people off. And to have a viable financial model ready and to have secured a grid connection or have a grid connection application in if this is applicable. And again, just to note that stage 1 feasibility is open to type A and type B projects, but stage 2 is only open to type A. A little overview of the activity in the North Eastern Yorkshire for round 1. So we received 10 applications, 5 different technologies were covered, and we had a grant ask of just shy of £350,000. Whereas nationwide, so covering all 5 hubs, there was 104 applications received. We had a national budget of £4 million for the first year, of which was oversubscribed, with a grant ask of just over 4.2 million. So lots of interest. We're thinking the second round will have even more interest because obviously it's got a much longer application window, and luckily it's not over the Christmas period, so hopefully there'll be more people able to apply. So just to be aware that there is a lot of interest, so please do ensure that you're putting as much time and detail into your application forms as you can, because I don't think we're going to be short of applications this time round. We got some national feedback from the department, which they'd received from people. So as I've mentioned, people did say that the timescales for round 1 were very, very tight. We were aware of this, and we obviously did our best to make them as doable as possible, but we are aware that a couple of weeks over the Christmas period absolutely was not ideal. So this time around, we've got a much longer timescale. We have a 2-month application window. I'll come to the exact dates in a moment, but we have made this a lot longer. People have asked if there would have been any additional support from the hub. So we now have Sue, who you're going to have a presentation from shortly, who's in post to support the sector themselves. And we have Emma on the team also, who supports the hub on delivery. So she's supporting with the programme management as well. And a lot of people have come to us and asked if we can recommend suppliers or consultants. Unfortunately, this is something the hub will not be allowed to do, and there won't be a point where we envision that the hub will ever be allowed to recommend contractors, just because obviously it's public funds and we don't want to recommend somebody and something happen and that public funding be at risk. However, the Midlands hub is creating a dynamic purchasing system that will be available for open use, in which people can use to find contractors. They can use that framework, and those people will have been approved before being added to the framework. So it should add a level of security to people that aren't sure who they should be looking for. And also we just encourage that people network between themselves. So if you're aware of a project that's done similar, ask them which consultants they used, ask them for a review, and go from there. So there are ways of finding suppliers. It's just the hub can't directly tell you these. Can I just ask that people mute themselves because there's quite a lot of feedback and I just want to make sure people can hear me. So we've got some of the lowest scoring questions from the first round. I'm not going to go through each of these individually just because I'm conscious of time, but when you do come to fill in your application form, please do reference these 2 slides because the parts in green are how you would get the highest marks on these questions. And obviously if they've been scored quite lowly in the first round, we may expect the same in the second round. So it's just a sort of little helpful tip of how you could maybe boost your marks on these sections and hopefully boost your marks overall. Some sort of top tips in terms of scale. Applications based on single buildings are eligible, but it does need to prove the benefit to the community beyond just lowering the bills of that building. So we are encouraging that projects come in with more than one building. So obviously the presentation from Andy shortly will say exactly how they did that and how that's worked. So please take some notes there. In terms of longevity, particularly for Type B projects, we need to prove that the proposal in mind will fill a gap in existing services and also that this project can be sustained over a period of years. So even though it is only early stage feasibility that this funding would be looking at in your application, please make it clear how this project would have a long lifespan. In terms of innovation, we have the definition of innovation by the Energy Systems Catapult on the screen there. So please have a read through, and if you can try and make your project as innovative as possible, you will gain more marks. We are aware that obviously there's only so many technologies out there and there's some fantastic projects that wouldn't be classed as hugely innovative, but they would have a really big impact. So you won't be scored down for not having a brand new project. You just might miss out on a couple of marks of something being super innovative, but obviously you can pull up those extra marks elsewhere. And in terms of if you've had some new ideas, but you have already received funding, you are eligible to apply again. So if you've got a new project on a new site, you would be eligible for the full stage 1 and stage 2 support, obviously eligibility dependent, as long as you don't go over your subsidy thresholds. If you have the same project and you, for example, had RCEF stage 2 funding of £50,000, you would be able to apply for an additional £50,000 to come up to that £100,000 threshold. And if you have any questions about your financial eligibility or whether you can apply for more grant than you've already had, please do reach out and we'll have a conversation about this. So we are open for round 2 applications at the minute. You can see that round 1, as I said, wasn't open for very long, but round 2 is open for much, much longer. A couple of questions have come up in terms of when people would actually start being able to deliver this feasibility work. So we'd be closing for applications, as you can see, at the beginning of May for this round, and we'd expect applicants to be made aware of whether they've been successful in August. So there is quite a gap between, but this is because we have external appraisers who are doing due diligence and appraisals for us to make sure they're done really, really thoroughly. And also because we need internal board approval and DESNZ approval. So we have had to build in some extra time there. So just to be aware for your project timelines that you wouldn't be able to be made aware of if you've been successful until August, and then there'd be a short contracting period as well. So in terms of the round 3, we're hoping for a round 3. It's still fund independent, but we'll update as soon as we can. I'm not going to run through exactly what happens after grant offer, just because I'm aware of time. However, if anyone has any questions, please do ask. In terms of how the grant is paid, it is a 25% upfront payment right at the beginning once it's contracted, and then it's claims quarterly based on projected spend. So whatever you'd project that you'd claim in that quarter, we'd be able to release at the beginning of the quarter. A little bit of information how you can get support from us there. So we've got our website. All inquiries can be sent to the email address that's on there. And like I've said, we are happy to discuss proposals in advance. Our little community energy team is on there. So there's myself, there's Sue, and there's Emma. All 3 of us are on the call, and all 3 of us are happy to answer any questions. We do have a regional project manager in each of our regions who, again, are on the screen. So feel free to take their email addresses and contact them. None of them are community energy focused, but they all know their own landscapes very, very well. So they may be able to offer support if we at the hub can't. And there's a slide of key takeaways, which I won't run through because I have covered them all. But please make sure you have a little read before you submit your application, just to make sure there's nothing you're missing on there. And then I will pass on to Andy, who I have seen join the call. Andy, just let me know if I've not moved the slides on quick enough, and I will move them on for you.
Okay, thank you, Abby. Morning, everyone. Andy Dean, I'm Chief Exec at CAN, Community Action Northumberland. We're a charity supporting rural communities in Northumberland for quite a long time, as you can see on there. There's three things I've been asked to cover in a very short time scale, 10 minutes, so I will rattle along. Apologies if I'm a bit garbled because of that. First is what's the project, which obviously you want to know about. Second thing is how are we set up? How's the organisation set up? And the third thing is why did we choose to do the project? So the banner for this is Northumberland Community Energy Limited, which I'll come back to in a moment, but its purposes are as set out there. It's all about reducing energy costs for community buildings, increasing their resilience and reducing their carbon footprint. Interestingly, when we started all this feasibility a couple of years ago, it was all about reducing carbon and a little bit about the other things. Now, because of Storm Arwen and everything else, it's absolutely about reducing energy costs and about resilience as much as it is about reducing carbon footprint. So that's the objectives. Next slide, Abby. So principle is, and if you click a couple of times, Abby, because there's different things come up on this slide at different points. So that's it. Stop there. Oh, one more. Sorry, one more. That's it. Thank you. So it's all about putting solar panels and batteries into community buildings. The mechanism for doing that is a cooperative. So the cooperative raises the money, carries out the installations, owns and manages those installations. And there's a lease agreement between the cooperative and each community building, which is village halls, community sports facilities, churches potentially as well. They're all community owned and managed assets. But there's a lease between the cooperative to put that equipment into the building, and part of that is a power purchase agreement to them for the community building to buy the power that is generated by the panels and the batteries. Of course, that's not enough to power the buildings 24/7, 365 days a year. So each building has its own separate power supply agreement with an energy supplier in the way that it normally would. So that's the basic principle. Next slide, Abby. This next slide just sets all out what I've just said in words. So co-op does all the work, peppercorn lease, which is for 20 years because that is the kind of usual figure that is used for projected lifespans of solar panels. Of course, they last longer than that, but that's the standard that we've used for this project. Next slide. I'm going very quickly here. This is good for me. I normally rattle on a bit. So what are the benefits? We have to be really clear about what are the benefits for buildings in doing this through a cooperative route rather than doing it themselves, because we've got lots of buildings in Northumberland that have already done this, want to do it, and that's great. That's fine. This is an alternative for them. So the benefits are that it's the co-op that does all the work. So the building can get on with managing their building rather than worrying about how they're going to manage to get funding to put solar panels and batteries in, how are they going to operate, which ones they go for, how are they going to manage them, how they operate them, all those sort of things. So the co-op does all that. We hope that we'll get better installation quotes as we go through, particularly as we scale this up. So if we're doing 3 or 4 installations in one locality as compared to one, that should result in lower costs per building. Co-op's taking all the risk. We will be employing a project manager at CAN to manage the installations, but also to act as operational manager thereafter for that 20-year period and beyond. And that's so, if that's adding trust to the project, because CAN's a charity. We support community buildings all the time. It's our day job. We're not going anywhere. So even if the project manager isn't available, we're there to answer all the questions, etc. anyway. And we were hoping that the co-op might be in a position to also get slightly better prices for utility, for electricity contracts for the buildings individually. That has become reality because the cooperative that we've set up, which is Northumberland Community Energy Limited, has enabled itself to become an associate member of NEPO, which is the North East Purchasing Organisation, which is set up by all the local authorities in the North East to bulk buy their own power. Individual buildings can't be a member of NEPO. The co-op is. So every time a building needs to renew its energy contract, it can get a quote via the co-op through NEPO, and that's working very well so far. Next slide, please.
I'm so sorry, Andy. I just need to really quickly interrupt. I've just got a notification to say that this meeting is going to end in 3 minutes, which it absolutely shouldn't be because it's set for 90. If this does happen, for everybody on the call, we will set up another meeting straight away and email a link to you all instantly, so that we can have a little bit more time. And I'm really, really sorry in advance because I'm not sure why that's happened. It did say it was set for 90 minutes. But just to be aware, if it does kick us all out, don't panic. You'll receive a link really, really shortly. I just cannot do it while I'm sharing my screen with the slides on. But yeah, I'll let you carry on, Andy, but just be aware if you get kicked out as well.
Okay, right. So,
Sorry.
So anyway, next slide. We'll see what happens. We're going to do it in 3 minutes. So governance, how is it set up? So the cooperative, Northumberland Community Energy Limited, is set up formally as a community benefit society, which are regulated by the FCA. We had support from Co-ops UK and the Co-op Bank to do that, make sure we got it right. Um, all the participating buildings can be members of the co-op, and only the participating building. Nobody else is a member, so it's wholly controlled and managed by the buildings themselves. They all have one member, one vote, one share. So, you know, bigger installations don't get a bigger say than smaller installations, as an example. It's the same for everybody. Liability is limited to £1. And for the day-to-day stuff, in addition to the project manager, there's a board appointed, which has already happened, which is 6 of the members, so 6 community building bods, and 2 expert independent people who are, one has extensive experience in business support and engagement, the other one in battery installations, EV charging, and also was used to be a solicitor. So lots of skills that are brought to the board. So they're the ones managing it. And importantly, there's an asset lock, which means that when this starts to generate surpluses in the future, that is asset locked back into the purposes of the co-op, which are to reduce the energy costs for members, to increase their resilience, and to reduce their carbon output. And it's the members that decide how any future surpluses are spent, nobody else within the purposes of the co-op. Next slide, please. So this is where we're at in a minute. NCEL, Northumberland Community Energy Limited, was formally set up in September last year. With RCEF funding, Rural Community Energy Fund, we completed 40 initial feasibility design studies for 40 buildings. We've got the funding in place for the first 4 installations. One of those, the biggest one from the Enabling Fund of the hub, balance of that, and the other 3 smaller installations from the National Lottery. We're almost in a position to say we've got the funding secured for the next 15, which is through this thing called RAMP, which I won't go into what that is, but it's basically combined authority money that is channeled through a rural strategy for the north of Tyne. So we've got that agreed, subject to grant agreement being put in place. And the aim is to get to 100 installations over the next 5 years, and that'll be about, we're not going to get all grant funded, it's going to be a balance of grant and loan. We're assuming about 50-50. The more grant we get, the sooner the co-op is in surplus and can put that money into purposes of the co-op, etc. So at the minute, we're maximising the grant as far as we can. 12 of the installations have got planning permission. Now, lots of people on the call will understand this, but you know, a lot of solar panel installations don't need planning permission. However, that's as long as they're within certain parameters, and they're not on a listed building, they're not in a designated area of any sort, etc., etc. And they're more than 500 mil from the roof edge and all sorts of technical things. Next slide, please, Abby. This is just a map showing you that we're recovering. These are the first couple of phases of buildings right across Northumberland. Next one, Abby. Right, this is kind of the last slide, really. So why have we bothered? That's how I put. Why did we choose to do the project? You do ask yourself this sometimes, don't you, when you kind of, you know, 2 years later. But we bothered because of the purposes of the co-op, which I've set that at the top. That's the prime reason, is to do those things for all these community buildings. But also what we've been able going down the cooperative route is enabling us to do is to ramp things up. So we're actually getting more buildings taking that step. We know some will do it anyway, which is fantastic, but this is enabling a lot more to do it. And for those that want to do it and might have been prepared to do it themselves, to just get on with other things, other improvements to the building, whatever it might be. It's very attractive to some of the more strategic funders. We're kind of doing that bit where, you know, you kind of, we're corralling the bottom-up community-led activity into something which you can see from space, you know, something which is really, really attractive, and you can see what the strategic impact is of a bunch of smaller interventions. So that's really, really important, and we are starting to access some of those strategic funds. We're also building up that knowledge and expertise, not just in the project manager, but in the partner organisations, which is us. And I should have bigged them up at the start: the Rural Design Centre and National Innovation Centre Rural Enterprise, which is Newcastle University. They're big partners in this project with us. So we're building up huge expertise, not just in panels and things, but actually the legal processes, the insurance process, all of those sort of things. So that's growing as we go, and we'll be standing in good stead for the future. There's those future surpluses for investment, and there's also a whole bunch of future opportunities from this as well. We could see collective EV charging points going in across our buildings. We could see buildings acting as hubs for local microgrids, all sorts of stuff. We could also see, if we get to a megawatt of storage capacity across 100 buildings, all of a sudden the conversation with the grid about dumping some power on us, to a cheap price, to it become part of the potential conversation. So there's a lot of future opportunities. Next slide, Abby. It's just a thanks to the funders. It's just so I've done that. And then the final slide has got a couple of links on it, which I'll post in the chat. The first one is the recruitment for our project manager, and the second one is a little film about the project, which is available to just kind of give a summary of it. I'll stop.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Andy. And Andy's slides will be included when we share the slides, and obviously the recording, so people can have a click through those links as well. We will now move on to Sue. Again, Sue, just tell me when you'd like me to move on.
Brilliant. Thanks, Abby. Yes, I'll try and gallop through this to allow enough time for Helen and questions as well. So I'm Sue Manson, Community Energy Development Officer for the North East and Yorkshire Net Zero Hub. My role is part of the wider Hub Community Energy Work Stream, which is being steered through a community energy steering group. We've previously delivered energy audit programs, carbon literacy training recently for local authorities and community energy groups. Obviously, we're running the Community Energy Fund grant program at the moment. And then there's my role, which runs until September 25. Next one, please. Just to highlight, the key aspect of the role is to build capacity in the community energy sector and develop relationships and partnerships with local authorities where they don't already exist. So I started this January, so it's still quite early days in terms of me familiarising myself with the community energy landscape, stakeholders, projects, potential projects, and also very much the support available in the North Eastern Yorkshire region. I cover the whole of the North East and Yorkshire. So basically, my role's everywhere from Sheffield up to the Scottish border. I don't have a background in energy. My background is in environmental project officer development, supporting community groups with grants and funding from both sides, and engagement activities. So the role is very much, community engagement officer role is very much about supporting, engaging and linking role, facilitating introductions, communications between groups and the support that they need, including obviously local authority officers, teams, and our regional hub project managers. We can provide advice, support and signposting to help communities develop local-led community energy projects, and very much the aim is to try and help projects develop from the start, inception idea phase, up to a stage ready for investment. And as mentioned, it's about developing links. Just to highlight, community energy projects can be about saving, managing or generating clean energy. So all three. Yeah, so just to give a little bit more background about the aims and my role and how I'll go about how I'm going about doing it. It is very much about sharing knowledge of community energy groups and projects in the region. It's about building and sharing knowledge about the support available for different groups and projects. So that groups come to us, we can point them in the direction of the support they need. It's about building relationships with existing emerging potential networks and groups. Obviously, my role covers the whole area. So I think a key way I'm trying to advance my role is by engaging with community energy, sustainability, or community infrastructure organizations networks. as Abby mentioned, you know, one of the key priorities is about sharing knowledge and learning with and between projects. You know, if somebody else is doing it down the road, hopefully we as a team will have a good enough knowledge about the range of projects throughout the region, and we can connect people. It's also about identifying barriers to developing community energy, seeing if we can find support for the way around those or feed those back up the line. Those barriers may include training and skills, it's very much about not reinventing the wheel if other support organisations are providing it. It's about adding to what support is already out there for community groups. And I'm working with the full range of key stakeholders, community energy groups, networks, infrastructure organisations, the energy sector, etc. And very much just to highlight, you don't have to be applying for the Community Energy Fund to come to me for support. Next, please. That's just a very brief overview of the state of community energy projects in 2022 to 23 in our area. So how can I support? Well, direct guidance and advice. So that at the moment obviously includes the Community Energy Fund application. And I can work with support groups or networks of groups to help them develop their community-led projects or point them in the direction of other people who can. As Abby mentioned, if you get in contact with us through inquiries, if we can answer that, we will, or it may require follow-on conversations or actions. Also, very much what I started doing is introducing different groups to each other where there's been a similar project and they can share knowledge and learning. So that's also part of it. Next, please. Oh, next, please. Thanks. So in terms of signposting to support, the types of support is obviously people, information, training, expertise, funding, and as mentioned, introductions to other groups. Sharing knowledge and learning between projects is quite a key aspect. Very much about encouraging networking groups, and I'm still finding the lay of the land in terms of forums and groups out there. So we're looking also, the opportunity for mentoring potential between groups, and very much about sharing models. That Andy's terrific model that he's just introduced us to. If there's models like that, it's raising awareness with other groups so that they can then explore that and potentially scale up or generate collaborative projects. We are, in terms of, obviously, we've got our website, which has information. We'll have events and webinars, not only our own, but other ones relevant to the sector. That also, just to mention, we're not trying to, we're aware there's a lot of training and webinars out there, so we're trying to add to that rather than duplicate it. And also we're building case study portfolio from within our region and also from other hubs where there's good knowledge to share. Basically, so a lot of my work is about engaging, and that might be through circulating info. We're generating a mailing list in the team so that we can then send out more directly information that might be of use to community groups or interests. Very much spreading the word by inputting into partner local community agency regional newsletter with information, and also direct engaging with climate sustainability energy groups. I've started attending various events, community energy events, and engaging with local sustainability networks. As mentioned, direct introductions and the portfolio. So it's very much also about partnership, working with other organisations, giving the community energy support, and many of those are on our steering group, so we have good relationships, that's the key aspect as well. Next, please. Identifying barriers to development of community energy, so we can see if we can help support, find a way around those, or pass that back up the line. Just to highlight 2 consultations, one is the government barriers to community energy projects, deadline of 30th of June, and the other is Community Energy England, which is a key source of information for community energy projects, as many people will know. And that state of the sector report is very valuable for their work and promoting community energy. So that's 22nd of April. Next, please. And just literally to put you up a few links and training. I won't go through them all, but you'll obviously get the slides. Which will include the recording of this. Also to mention, Northern Power Grid do run free workshops, and there's a 4th of July forum in person, location yet to be decided. And they also have an open data portal where you can interrogate your local electricity network, which is online now, and they may well be doing training on that in the future, which is potentially good use to groups. Next, please. And that's me done. So thank you very much. And obviously any queries, do get in touch.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Sue. Just in case we embarrassingly do get kicked off, we've got plenty of time for Helen's presentation, but just in case, if people do have any questions that we may not have time to do a Q&A for, please do pop them in the chat, and Emma's going to keep a list of them. And we are creating a frequently asked questions document, which we're going to pop on our website. So if you have any sort of generic questions, obviously feel free to just email them to an inquiries inbox and we'll respond to you directly. But if not, pop them in the chat. We'll put them on the FAQ document to make sure you do get your questions answered. But yeah, just in case we don't have time for the Q&A. But I will move on to Helen from South Yorkshire EcoFit. Thank you very much, Helen. Again, please just let me know when to move your slides on, and I will do so.
Great, thank you so much. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Brilliant. So yeah, I'm Helen from SY EcoFit in South Yorkshire, and yeah, just going to share a little bit about our project. If you could just move on to the next slide. So yeah, I'm going to kind of talk about similar areas to Andy, but in a slightly different order. So kind of starting with the why, a little bit about the challenge and why we wanted to do it, then a bit about SY EcoFit and how we're set up, and then taking you through our project with the Community Energy Fund. So yeah, a little bit on kind of the background, why we kind of felt the need to do this project. So as in lots of areas, domestic energy use is a big chunk of total energy use in South Yorkshire, kind of between 29% in Doncaster and 39% in Sheffield. As in lots of other areas, there's a lot of houses with an EPC rating below C that are quite energy inefficient, and a very old housing stock that's still going to be around for the foreseeable future, so a big need for retrofit. But the actual kind of situation and the barriers and the needs in different areas and among different communities are really variable. So some areas with very high levels of fuel poverty, and then others with what I didn't just make this up, it's a term I've seen in academic writing, energy decadence in some wealthier areas where there's people who are using a disproportionate amount of energy compared to others, and not engaging in changes. Also people from ethnic minorities are disproportionately impacted by fuel poverty, but a lot of the existing projects are targeted at less wealthy people in the uptake of grants. So for example, Sheffield City Council's Warm Homes project. And so to achieve kind of the twin goals of decarbonising while also achieving social equity, there's a need to work across socio-economic groups, not just with people in fuel poverty. If you could move to the next slide. And then a bit of the kind of context since the South Yorkshire Energy Centre closed. There isn't really a central kind of point for expertise and information. A lot of people that we've spoken to who've actually tried to get retrofit work done have found there's a lack of a kind of accessible pathway from basic information to actually getting complex work done. There's a lot of kind of fragmentation, and some people have talked about kind of poor quality retrofit work damaging confidence and making people kind of reluctant to get work done. And there's also been I think, less work in South Yorkshire compared to some of our neighbours. So there's been a lot of great work. We know in Leeds, for example, I can see Lucy from Climate Action Leeds on the call. They've been doing some great work, people powered retrofit in Manchester, a lot of other projects around the country as well. And move on. So a bit about SY EcoFit. We're set up as a community interest company, and we just registered in November last year, so we're really quite new. And we're working on projects aiming to decarbonise whilst building community wealth. And so we're focusing on developing community-centred approaches, responding to the needs of South Yorkshire and relationship building. And we are working on both retrofit and community energy projects, but focusing more on the kind of retrofit side today. And we are looking at the possibility of setting up different kind of models for community ownership as we develop our services. Within retrofit, we really want to increase the scale and pace of retrofit in the area, and looking at different aspects of it. So developing the market, but also developing partnerships and collaboration across the supply chain. So we've been doing some work, bringing together different people in the supply chain, starting to look at the priorities, how we can have better collaboration, and also looking at ways to break down the barriers that are currently hindering the delivery of retrofit work and the scaling of it. So a little bit about kind of the overall pathway that we see on retrofit. We've got a number of customers there, and looking at it kind of an overall phased model from kind of advice and information and understanding through to getting assessments done, planning retrofit work, and then the design and build, and also kind of ongoing learning throughout that. But we're aware that what this looks like needs to kind of vary in different areas according to the needs of different communities and different people. You can move on to the next slide. So this is a little bit about our Community Energy Fund project. Overall, what we're aiming to do is develop a feasibility study for our holistic retrofit service, particularly focusing on phase one, that kind of initial advice stage, and aiming to develop a socially, financially, and environmentally sustainable model. So kind of the main components, we're gathering lessons learned from other projects. As I was mentioning, we know there's a lot of work that's been happening around the country, and so we're keen to kind of learn as much as possible from that. Then selecting a range of communities to work with. So we're looking at both geographical and communities of interest, and aiming to work with communities, around 6 in total, with quite varying characteristics in terms of kind of socio-economic makeup, where they are in South Yorkshire, a range of different factors. And then we'll be using a human-centered design approach, which I'll talk a bit more about in a moment, to engage communities, look at the current situation, the kind of enablers and barriers, and co-design solutions. And then we'll be developing and testing some of the prototype solutions that are developed through that, and also in parallel to that, looking at the financial modelling and like what the costs will be associated with that and what it can look like. And then we'll be bringing all that together into an overall feasibility study, and exploring next steps. And then kind of at the bottom, I've got some of the ongoing parts that we'll be working on throughout the project. So continuing to engage stakeholders, local government, the SIMCA, different community organisations, etc. We're also getting some mentoring from People Powered Retrofit, who've developed a really good one-stop shop model, and also SAGA, which is a social enterprise growth accelerator through Sheffield Social Enterprise Network, and further developing the organisation. You could go on to the next slide. This is just a little bit about the human-centered design model. There were some arrows which seem to have disappeared, but here are kind of the basic phases. So first of all, the inspiration phase, which will be learning from people in the different communities that we're working with, and also kind of reviewing existing research. So, for example, the Sustainability Centre at the University of Sheffield has been doing a lot of research, and we'll be looking at working with them and learning together. Then the ideation phase, which is really about generating loads of ideas. So working with people from the communities to kind of look at what are some of the ways that we could solve some of the common challenges and barriers that are coming up. Then looking at refining some of those ideas and developing them into prototypes and testing them. And then finally implementation, so rolling out the most promising prototypes, which isn't the stage we're expecting to get to within this project, but we're hoping that we'll have proposals on where we want to go next on the kind of implementation and rollout. And it is kind of an iterative process, so the arrows that are on there would have shown that's kind of the general flow, but there's also there's also kind of learning and feedback at all the different stages.
Sorry, struggling to unmute there. Thank you very much, Helen. It's really insightful to hear from a Type B project, because like I say, they are new to the Community Energy Fund, so thank you so much for that. We do have some time now for questions and answers, hopefully, as long as we don't get kicked out again. I will stop sharing my screen just so I can see if people have their hands up. When it lets me stop. There we go, perfect. I did see 2 questions in the chat. So first of all, I'll just run through those. There was one from Alan, which was directly to me, but just to answer for ease. So the question was, for Type B energy efficiency type projects, is it just for households or can it be for community groups and buildings as well? The guidance we've been given from DESNZ is that it is for a multiple household scheme. However, because Type B is such a new idea to all of us, if you did have a model that you'd like to look at the feasibility of to cover community groups or community buildings instead, please do, if you could pop a little bit more detail in the email just about, for example, who you'd partner with, who would sort of own the project and things like that. I can ask DESNZ directly and get an answer for you, just to make sure that I'm giving you the right bit of information, and just to make sure, with obviously it being new to us as well. And then we had a question about the funding available. If I just open the chat again. For how much is left. So for year 2, which could include rounds 2 and 3, so year 2 will take us from March of this year through to March of next year, which will be programme end. Then there's £5 million available nationally. We've not had any confirmation from DESNZ as of yet exactly if each hub's allocation will be just £1 million each, or if this will be slightly different. And we're also waiting for confirmation for any underspend from the hubs from year 1, whether this can be carried forward on top of our allocations. Because it is the pre-election period, they are not able to confirm it to us just yet, but they're hoping to confirm to us in May once the elections are out of the way. To which we will then be able to advise people how much we have for year 2 and whether that will mean a big round 2 or a round 2 and a round 3. So not a perfect answer, I'm aware, but just so there's some sort of answer there. I can now see a timer at the top of the screen for 8 minutes, so just to be aware that there is only 8 minutes of the meeting left. I'm happy to do 8 minutes of questions if people have them. Obviously, please do send them to the inquiries email address that or to me. I've emailed you all the links. If you want to send them direct to me, feel free and we'll pick them up as well. But if anyone has any questions they'd like to ask just now, please feel free to pop your hand up and we can go through them. But I did just want to note as well, because I don't think it was clear from my presentation, delivery of these projects is 12 months from the point of grant offer. So just because the programme itself ends in March 2025. For example, if you were offered a grant in October of this year, you would have 12 months to deliver it from the point of that offer. So you'd have until October 2025. So just because the programme technically ends in the March of 25 doesn't mean that you wouldn't get your full 12 months of delivery from the point of grant offer. Does anybody have any questions that I could answer just now? I don't think I'm seeing any hands up. People speak up if I'm missing them. I'm flicking between screens. No.
Hello, hello. Can I
Oh.
ask a question? Sorry.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, I am also from SY Coffee. My name is Julia. I work with Helen as well. We sort of want to apply for another grant now, and it's going to be partnership with other academia universities. Are we allowed to pay for their time in the project? Can be included in the application?
So you'd be applying through the Community Energy Fund again?
Yeah. We are community interest organization, and just because we have partners like academia, so Sheffield University.
Of course. We do have some words in the guidance document specifically around partnerships. So I will just get that out for you just so I can read the exact wording for you to make sure I'm saying it correctly rather than the top of my head.
Yeah.
But I will just find it. Because funnily enough, I had the exact same question yesterday from somebody else. So we do welcome partnerships, but you must obviously have a lead partner, which by the sounds of it would be yourselves. The funds can be passed from the lead partner to the supporting partners, which you have specified in your application without the need for a competitive tender, as long as the partners would be eligible to apply themselves. If you are partnering with a non-eligible organisation, which an academic is non-eligible, you can't pass. Just to make it make sense, it is not permissible to pass their funds to the non-eligible organisation unless you've done a competitive tender or as part of the fees payable to the public bodies required. So you'd have to do a tender for the academic work to be able to pass the funding on because they're not an eligible organisation.
So how can we do tender?
You'd have to reach out to get 3 different quotes as a minimum, or your own procurement processes if they're slightly different for the sort of consultancy advice you'd get from an academic, and then you'd have to.
Something unique that nobody offers. Well, how can we?
If nobody else offers it, then you just have to explain your application form why you were unable to do a full tender. And if it is purely because nobody else offers it, that you can put that in the application, because then you'd have tested the market. As long as you can prove you've tested the market and prove the reason why you had to select that specific supplier, and then that classes as a procurement procedure for us and would class as a tender.
Lovely. Okay, thank you so much.
No worries at all. Thank you. Is there any other questions all in the last 4 minutes that we have? Ian.
Thank you. Right. You can't be using the paid for account for this meeting, otherwise you wouldn't get that time left thing. But,
I am not a Zoom expert. I usually use Teams, so it's all new to me. I'm just really sorry it cut us off.
Right.
Okay, just sorry to butt in, but just to mention that I can share another link if you'd like me to for a follow on, or do you just want to?
I think we'll end with Ian's question, and then we'll take all questions via the inquiries inbox and people can get written responses.
Apologies, Ian.
Thank you. So I'm here with Nick, and we're running a project that is just installation on a block of flats, which I think isn't eligible, but also I can't see what kind of feasibility study we'd need. We'll get quotes from the installer, but it occurs to me that we're actually on a new build estate with 500 houses, most of which are still under NHBC, but quite a lot of them have insulation problems because the construction was sloppy. And I'm wondering whether some sort of project to do a systematic survey of the houses and get them fixed and up to scratch. For example, my house, one wall is missing insulation on one room, and that's quite a common problem, I think, but I don't know for sure. So I'm wondering whether a project like that might benefit from some kind of feasibility study that might be eligible.
So because it would be energy efficiency across multiple households, it would fall under a Type B project. It's just worth noting that the feasibility is primarily to look at the model you'd take forward. The feasibility study couldn't be the survey on those homes. It would be looking at which model you'd need to then go ahead and survey those homes. So I think
it include, say, a paper survey. Do you think you've got problems like this, or can you look for that?
I think desk-based research, obviously in some engagement within the households and the community would be necessary for the feasibility study, but you wouldn't be able to go out and do the tests yourself and the checks yourself through feasibility funding, because that would cast as actual like project delivery.
Okay. Right. So we've got a thermal camera. Could we just, I mean, I guess we could use that in the study provided we weren't paying for the use of it.
Yeah, as long we can't we can't stop you doing anything you're not going to claim through the community energy fund. So if that was
Okay,
something you were
right.
going to go out and do yourselves and
Right.
implement into the feasibility study, but of course we wouldn't be able to sort of pay for the camera or for your time doing it. But it would all have to feed into what model would we be looking for to go ahead and do these things, if that makes sense.
Okay, thank you.
No worries at all. The timer is showing just a minute left, so we'll leave it there because I don't want to cut anybody else off. Thank you so much for coming along today. I do hope it was helpful for you. Again, I'm really, really sorry about the fact it cut us off and the mess around in the middle. We'll try and make sure that never happens again because that was no fun for any of us. If you do have any questions at all, please do email us through the inquiries inbox. No question is too small. We are happy to meet up with people and have a chat about their projects prior to it if they would like to. And we'll make sure we send a link to where you can view the recordings and the presentations as soon as possible. But thank you very much. All information is available on our website, including the application forms, which once they're complete need email into the same inquiries inbox, which we've mentioned a couple of times through. Thank you very much, everybody, and please enjoy the rest of your day and have a lovely, lovely weekend when it comes. And I hope it brightens up a little bit because it's quite miserable up in the northeast where I am. Take care, everybody. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.